So guys, let me tell you something that really shook things up. When the Western countries thought India would just give in, when they thought that just one phone call from Washington could make India scared, India stood up tall. India didn't just talk back, it hit back with such a strong message that even the really powerful countries had to stop and listen. India refused to bend when others pushed because India is built on being tough, brave, and never giving up its independence. For way too long, big powerful countries thought that India would always just react, that it would give up when threatened, or give in when other countries put pressure on them. But the India we see today is not the India that used to hesitate. It is the India that knows what it believes in. When the West tried to test how patient India was when they made demands that went against what India wanted, India didn't stay quiet but spoke clearly, reminding everyone that it can't be bullied or forced to do what others want. This refusal to bend wasn't because India was being mean, but because India has dignity. The kind of dignity that comes from hundreds of years of struggle, sacrifice, and surviving tough times. Every time India makes a decision on the world stage, it follows the rule that its people, its stuff, and its future can't be given up just to make others happy. When India stands strong, it carries the weight of its history. A history where its people went through being controlled by other countries, being ruled by foreigners, and decades of being looked down upon. Those times taught India one really important lesson. Giving in to pressure only makes others control you more, but standing tall makes others respect you. That's why now when powerful countries try to tell India what to do, when they give warnings or even try to threaten India, India simply says a quiet but unshakable no. This no isn't just saying no, it's saying that decisions for India will only be made by India. This attitude makes those who are used to smaller countries just doing what they're told feel uncomfortable, but it also inspires millions of people around the world who see India as an example of how to keep your independence in a world controlled by giants. The refusal to bend isn't about fighting, but about balance. India knows its place in a world where working together matters. Friends are valuable and talking is necessary, but working together isn't the same as giving in, and talking isn't the same as just obeying. India's leaders, through both their words and actions, have shown that cooperation must come with respect. This insistence on mutual respect is the real reason why India stands firm even when facing pressure from global powers. It's a reminder that strength isn't shown by how loud you talk, but by how firmly you stand. India's strength doesn't just come from its military or money, but from the willpower of its people who believe that their nation deserves to choose its own path. It's this shared will that fuels every stance, every refusal, and every uncompromising stand on the world stage. India isn't moved by threats because it has faced much worse in its past. It doesn't shake with fear before power because it understands its own, and it refuses to bend because bending would mean betraying the very spirit that has carried it from struggle to strength, from silence to having a voice, from giving in to leadership. India's response was powerful and dignified because it came from calm strength rather than angry words. In the world of global diplomacy, words are important, and the way a nation replies often shows more than just the message itself. When pressure was put on India and expectations were placed on India to follow a path decided by others, the response didn't come as anger, not as giving in, but as a measured way of saying, we are independent. This balance of power and grace is what gave the reply its dignity. A powerful response doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes it's the firm steadiness of believing in something that makes the listener uncomfortable. India's words carried authority because they were spoken clearly, backed by determination, and framed with respect for its own principles. The dignity in India's response comes from understanding that strength must be shown with restraint. There was no need to throw insults or make the conflict bigger, because that would have weakened the moral ground on which India stood. Instead, the response had the tone of maturity, reminding the world that true leadership isn't defined by controlling others, but by standing firm without losing your cool. Dignity means respecting yourself enough to never bow under pressure, but also respecting the other enough to not turn the conversation into hostility. This is the balance India kept showing, that power without dignity is aggression, and dignity without power is weakness. But when the two come together, they create influence. India's words were heard across borders because they reflected the voice of a nation confident in its path. The powerful part was in how firm its message was, that it would not give up on matters of national interest, that it would not trade independence for favors, and that it would not let anyone else decide what's important to it. The dignified part was in how it was delivered. No shouting, no trying to make others angry, just a calm reminder that India is equal, not less than others. This kind of response takes away critics' power because it doesn't give them any opening to fight back. A dignified answer can't be easily dismissed. A powerful answer can't be ignored. That's why India's stand left such a strong impression. The strength of this moment also lies in how it inspired its own people. Citizens saw in their leaders the values they hold dear: pride in who they are, confidence in their future, and the ability to hold their head high even when facing global pressure. This sense of empowerment spread beyond India's borders too, giving courage to other nations that often feel overshadowed by dominant powers. The response wasn't just a reply to the West. It was a message to the world that dignity is possible even when you're defying someone, that power doesn't require hostility, and that independence can be protected without being arrogant. This rare combination made India's stance unforgettable, setting an example of how nations can be both strong and graceful at the same time. Jaishankar delivered a bold message because he chose being clear over being confusing and conviction over hesitation. In a world where diplomacy often hides behind carefully chosen words, his voice carried the sharpness of truth, refusing to soften the reality of India's stance. His message wasn't wrapped in the usual language of compromise or apology, but was presented with directness that left no room for misunderstanding. This boldness came from his deep understanding of India's place in the global order and his confidence that India no longer needs others to speak for it. It speaks for itself. Every word he spoke reflected strength, independence, and the refusal to allow India's interests to be decided by outside forces. The boldness of his message wasn't in being aggressive, but in being honest. When he reminded the world that India would make decisions based on its own priorities, he was challenging an old system where powerful nations assumed they could control the policies of others. By saying out loud what many nations only whisper, Jaishankar set India apart as a country unafraid of global judgment. He didn't seek validation, he didn't seek approval, and that very independence of voice became his greatest power. To speak boldly in diplomacy is to take risks, but those risks are the mark of true leadership, and Jaishankar embodied that courage. His message was also bold because it was consistent. He didn't waver or change depending on the audience. Whether speaking in the East or the West, whether addressing allies or critics, his words carried the same tone of self-respect. Consistency is rare in international politics, where leaders often adjust their message to suit the room. Jaishankar's refusal to do so made his stance stand out even more. It showed that India's position isn't conditional or fragile, but grounded in principles that cannot be bought or bent. Boldness isn't just in what is said, but in the refusal to water down the truth for convenience. What made his message resonate even further was the calmness with which it was delivered. He didn't shout, he didn't dramatize, but the firmness in his voice was unshakable. This calm confidence unsettled many because it showed that India wasn't reacting emotionally, it was responding rationally and deliberately. A bold message spoken in anger can be dismissed as just talk, but a bold message spoken with composure becomes unarguable. That's exactly why Jaishankar's words traveled so far and struck so deep, because they carried both power and precision in his delivery. Jaishankar wasn't only speaking for India, but also giving a voice to countless nations who feel sidelined by dominant powers. He proved that the boldest message isn't the one that demands others to give in, but the one that declares independence. His words carried the weight of a rising nation asserting its place in history, and in doing so, he redefined what it means to be bold on the global stage. India positioned itself as a global force, not a follower, by stepping into the international stage with a voice that is independent, confident, and uncompromising. For decades, the image of India in the global order was one of a developing nation that often aligned itself with larger powers, or played the role of a silent participant in global decision-making. But today's India has changed that perception. It no longer waits for validation, nor does it look to others for direction. Instead, it charts its own course, defines its own priorities, and demands recognition as an equal. This positioning isn't accidental. It's the result of years of building strength in multiple dimensions: economic growth, technological advancement, military capability, cultural influence, and diplomatic consistency. When India speaks in forums like the United Nations, the G20, or international dialogues, it doesn't merely echo what others say. It brings forth perspectives shaped by its own experiences, its own challenges, and its own vision for the future. By refusing to be a follower, India is showing the world that leadership doesn't belong to just a few select nations. It belongs to anyone with the courage to stand firm and the wisdom to speak with authenticity. This shift has redefined India's role from being just a participant to being a force whose opinions, actions, and strategies carry weight. Nations that once tried to dictate terms to India are now learning to negotiate with it as an equal partner. The essence of positioning as a global force lies in influence, and India has begun to wield influence not through domination, but through example. Whether it is leading in digital innovation, being the pharmacy of the world by supplying vaccines, or advocating for climate responsibility while balancing developmental needs, India has proven that its actions can shape outcomes globally. This influence is far stronger than blind alignment because it's based on credibility. By consistently standing for its own interests while also contributing to global good, India is setting a new model of leadership that inspires rather than imitates. Another aspect of India's rise as a force is its ability to engage with all sides without being trapped in camps. It maintains strong ties with the United States while also valuing its relationship with Russia. It strengthens bonds with the West while continuing to deepen partnerships in Asia and Africa. This balanced diplomacy is possible only for a nation confident enough to make decisions on its own terms. Followers choose sides. Leaders create bridges. By creating these bridges, India has positioned itself as a central player in shaping the future of global order. Most importantly, this positioning isn't just about geopolitics. It's about mindset. A follower waits for instructions. A force leads with vision. India has embraced the mindset of a leader by refusing to compromise its independence, by ensuring its voice is heard, and by proving that it's not here to play a secondary role in history, but to actively shape it. This confidence has become the mark of a rising power that the world can no longer overlook. The West was shocked by India's confidence because it had grown accustomed to a world where developing nations often bowed under pressure or softened their stance to maintain favor with powerful countries. For decades, the narrative was simple. The West dictated the terms of engagement, and others adjusted accordingly. But India's firm and unapologetic confidence broke that pattern, challenging assumptions that had remained unshaken for years. When India refused to bend, when it responded with dignity and strength, it created a moment of disruption that the West didn't anticipate. Instead of pleading or negotiating from a position of weakness, India stood tall and declared that its choices would be guided solely by national interest, not by the approval of external powers. This confidence was shocking because it wasn't a temporary display, nor was it wrapped in aggression. It was calm, composed, and rooted in a belief that India had earned its place at the table as an equal. The West had expected resistance, perhaps, but not this kind of self-assured conviction that carried no fear of consequences. For the first time, many in the global arena realized that India was no longer simply seeking validation. It was asserting authority. This realization unsettled those who had long assumed they could influence India's decisions by pressure or persuasion. The source of this confidence lies in India's transformation. Its rapid economic growth, technological achievements, military modernization, and cultural reach have given it the backbone to stand independently. But even more than material strength, it's the mindset that has shifted. India now sees itself as a civilizational power with responsibilities to its people and to the world, not as a state that must operate under the shadow of others. The West was surprised to see that India's new self-image wasn't just rhetoric, but a reality guiding its policies and diplomacy. Confidence backed by capability becomes undeniable, and that's what made India's stance so striking. Another element of the shock was that India didn't isolate itself while showing this confidence. Instead, it continued to maintain relationships with all sides, proving that independence doesn't mean hostility. This ability to balance ties while refusing to compromise independence is what confused and amazed Western observers. They expected India to pick a side, to play by familiar rules. But India demonstrated that it could redefine the rules and still remain a central player. Confidence of this kind is rare in global politics, and it forces others to reevaluate their assumptions. The West's reaction is also a reflection of how power dynamics are shifting. For centuries, global influence was concentrated in a few hands. But India's confidence is a symbol of a multipolar world emerging. By speaking firmly and standing unapologetically, India reminded the world that respect isn't granted by the West. It's earned through self-belief and resilience. That shock wasn't just about India's words, but about the realization that the world order itself is changing, and India is helping lead that change. This moment reflects India's rebirth of national confidence because it signifies a transformation from hesitation to conviction, from silence to voice, and from compliance to leadership. For decades after independence, India struggled to balance its aspirations with the realities of poverty, limited resources, and global perceptions that often underestimated its potential. While it always carried a civilizational identity, its ability to project that identity with authority on the world stage was constrained. But today, India speaks with a tone that is both firm and fearless, and this shift marks the rebirth of a confidence that had been waiting to rise. It's not the borrowed confidence of alliances, nor is it the fragile confidence of temporary victories. It's a deep, enduring self-belief born out of consistent progress, resilience through challenges, and the rediscovery of its strength as a nation. This renewed confidence is visible in multiple dimensions. Economically, India has become one of the fastest-growing large economies, offering innovation and opportunity to the world. Militarily, it has built an arsenal capable of defending its independence while modernizing for future threats. Culturally, it has embraced its traditions with pride while engaging with global modernity without hesitation. Politically, it has shown that it can maintain its independence in decision-making even while engaging with the strongest powers. All these layers contribute to the rebirth of confidence that isn't just felt at the top levels of leadership, but shared by ordinary citizens who now believe that their nation's voice matters and cannot be ignored. The significance of this moment lies in the fact that confidence isn't just about what India says to the world, but about what it believes about itself. National confidence means knowing that India no longer has to look outward for validation. It carries within itself the strength to define its destiny. This is a powerful transformation because nations that lack confidence often hesitate to take bold steps, fearing disapproval or backlash. India's rebirth of confidence means it no longer asks permission to safeguard its interests or to express its vision of the world. It asserts itself naturally as a nation that has both the capacity and the right to lead. This moment also reflects the culmination of a long journey from vulnerability to empowerment. India has endured invasions, colonial exploitation, partition, and decades of developmental struggles. Yet none of these trials broke its spirit. Instead, they became lessons that shaped its determination. The rebirth of confidence is the triumph of endurance over adversity, showing that no matter how long a nation has been underestimated, there comes a day when its true strength cannot be hidden. That day has come for India, and the world is witnessing it. What makes this rebirth particularly powerful is that it's not rooted in arrogance, but in self-respect. India's confidence isn't about dismissing others, but about affirming itself. It's about walking into the global stage, not as a follower, not as a silent participant, but as a nation that knows its worth and carries its history with pride. This moment represents the awakening of a spirit that had been waiting to shine.